Santa's always watching.
Okay, who's excited to meet Santa?
Ladies and gentlemen, MB, Silent Night, Deadly Night has officially gotten a remake from director Mike P. Nelson, the guy behind the Wrong Turn movie. And let me just say, he's 2 for 2 in my book with remakes. Silent Night, Deadly Night follows serial killer Billy Chapman as he sets out on a mission to kill one person every single day of December, like an advent calendar. Billy as a kid witnessed his parents die to Santa Claus, and in that he took up the mantle of the serial killer and decided to torment towns on his own. That's the basic plot of this movie. Now, the first thing I want to dive into is how different this remake is from the original. I think it's a very important topic to discuss when talking about horror remakes, and this one is very different. It pays a lot of homage to the original 80s film, but it does a lot of its own things and own ideas when it comes to the actual story of this remake. So in the original film, it's a lot more slashery, serial killery, and this one is still very much a slasher, but there's this twist they have towards the end that they reveal why Billy Chapman is the way he is, and I honestly like it a lot more than the 80s film that just kind of goes, he's a serial killer. I also can appreciate, and it's a very minor thing, but in the 80s film, they kind of have a over-the-top sexual assault scene of his mother in the opening part, and I think it was nice they didn't do that this time. I think just having the two parents die by Santa Claus is a lot less traumatizing. It's still traumatizing as hell, this poor kid. Either way, the story of his origins can be told well in both versions of the film. I think I just preferred the remakes versions of the events. It's also much shorter in the first film. I feel like they spend so long diving into the origins that it's kind of like, okay, I don't really care that this guy robbed a store, watched him rob a store. Now he's stopping these people on a highway. We just get straight to the point in the remake. It's, here's on the highway, here's the story in little chunks. You already know what it is, and if you don't, we'll make sure it makes sense to you. And I really like that approach to it. I think the motivation of having him kill and pick someone off every single day of December is a really nice change of pace to this film. I think it adds a lot more motivation to the character that was missing in the 80s film. I think this contrasts nicely with the romance that they have in this, which is much like the original film. He falls in love with a woman in his workplace, and it kind of spirals from there. But I like the dynamic they create between those characters in this film in comparison to the first one. I think it makes the push and pull of him wanting to be a serial killer to rid the world of naughty people, but also wanting to settle down and have a life and a future with this woman he loves. I think it's a really good dynamic that the first film kind of missed out on. There's a lot of cool gore sequences in this film. I think my favorite was when he goes to a Nazi rally and kills the entire building of people. Just given the way the world is, I think it's a very therapeutic sequence to have. And I also think it's very smart that they're putting it in the marketing. That is a good way to get people in seats. Because let's be honest here, what do Americans not love more than killing Nazis? It's why we love Inglourious Bastards. All jokes aside, the gore sequences and the horror in this movie is really good, and I think this is one of those modern slashers that'll go down as one of the gorier ones in memory. Now, that being said, we'll see if people agree with me, because Toxic Avenger I thought was pretty graphic, and I haven't really heard people talk about that film. I think this film has more of a chance in terms of longevity and being in the public eye more, especially because it's a Christmas horror movie, and we don't get those a lot. And Christmas horror is the best kind of holiday horror that you can get. I also want to address the two lead performances of Rohan Campbell and Ruby Modine. I think their chemistry is really good. They're a believable couple, but also I love their individual characteristics. We'll start with Ruby's character, Pamela. Pamela is very much a stick-it-to-the-man type character. She works in this shop that her dad owns. She's, kind of quirky in her own ways, and I think she's a very fun character to follow. I think the direction they take her arc in this film is a lot more interesting than the first film. She's a lot more included in the storyline and in the events that are taking place. That's most I can say without spoiling, because I think it's a good thing to go in not knowing, but just know she's a bigger character. And as for Campbell, I think he's a great actor. I really liked him in Halloween Ends. I'm one of the few people who really enjoyed Halloween Ends, and so having him play a serial killer once again is incredibly exciting for me. That was honestly the biggest selling point of this film, is the fact that he was playing Billy Chapman, and I think he nails it. Especially the new angle the story takes in this one. I think he does a good job selling it. I think without him, it would be a harder script to sell, because he's just so good at playing this type of serial killer. Without spoiling much, I think there's a lot of parallels to the script of Halloween Ends, even though you can tell it's unintentional, because I'm sure these films were made roughly around the same time script-wise. But I think that's why it works so well, is because he's already played a character similar to this in Halloween Ends, and now he's doing it again on arguably a more vicious scale. Also, going back to Mike P. Nelson, a really great filmmaker. I liked his VHS segment, I liked his Wrong Turn movie, and now I like Silent Night, Deadly Night. And you know what? I'd like to see him do more slasher franchises. I could see a good Jason movie coming from Mike P. Nelson. I think he has what it takes to take on the big guy and make a good slasher movie, as he proves he knows what makes slashers good, which is both the horror and the violence and the graphicness, but also the humor and the human relationships. And I think while nothing in this film is like over the top, craziest thing I've ever seen. It's never been done before. I think Mike P. Nelson does a really good job at directing his actors to fit these stereotypes that we know for slasher films. And that is what makes this film such a good experience, is it knows what it is, and it knows what it's trying to do, and it does so successfully. Campbell does this really cool thing with Billy in this film, where the Santa Claus suit kind of triggers him to become this serial killer, further exploring the depth of the character in a way the original didn't. How many times am I going to say that? Take a shot every time I say the original didn't do this. But I mean it though. The original film did not dive into the character as much as I would have liked for this kind of slasher film, and I think they do so in a way that's very satisfying in this one. And that is due in part to Campbell's acting when in the Santa suit. There's one sequence in particular that is a remake of the original film's sequence at the store where he's dressed as Santa and talking to the kids, and they redo that scene here, but they make it a lot more where you're inside his head and hearing his thought process, and I think it expands the character in such a great way, and it might be Campbell's best performance in the film at the same time. Just overall really good stuff. And that's not the only scene they recreate. There's a lot of things recreated in this film from the original. I gotta think of some shots that I noticed that were in the trailers. I think the only one I can think of right now that's not a huge spoiler is the antler kill is obviously in this film. It's in the trailer, but there are a good 5 or 6 other shots that I noticed that were done directly like they were in the 80s film, and that's due to the DP. Nick Junkersfeld is the DP on this. He also worked on Nelson's VHS as the cinematographer, as well as the Wrong Turn film, and I just think he does a good job. It's the same thing I had to say about Wrong Turn, and like, I really think the cinematography in that movie does justice to an IP that really shouldn't have that good a cinematography, and I'd say that's the same thing here. Like, Silent Night, Deadly Night doesn't need to have fantastic cinematography, yet it does, and they absolutely kill it on, like I said, the direction and the visual style of it. I also want to shout out Jeff Klein, the editor. I think the editing in this film is really weird, but in such a good way. You'd know what I mean if you've seen the trailers, just some of the ways they cut between these shots where you don't know what's real life, what's not. I think it's very cool and very well done. So Jeff, very great job. I haven't seen any of your work before, but I want to go check out more of it because of your editing on this film. I just think it's something that not a lot of people are going to mention that I think deserves a little bit of credit. The music also has callbacks to the original, which I really liked. This film's just a good time. And at a time when a lot of films are trying to get their last-minute Oscar grab, like Marty Supreme, which I'm sure I'll like that film too. But when all these films right now are trying to get Oscar grabs, it's nice to have a film come out that's just pure fun and is meant to honor a horror classic. Now, I've been saying a lot of positives. As for my negatives, the real thing is I think once it is revealed what direction the story is going, that makes it so different from the original film. You kind of get lost for a second. You're kind of like, okay, what's happening? I watched this with a friend of mine, and the two of us were just sitting there like, what are we doing? What direction is the story going? None of this is connecting. And by the end, it does all connect, and it wraps up nicely. But while you're taking that journey, you're kind of like, okay, I'm lost. I don't get exactly what you're going for. But the minute it all does come together and you know what they're going for, it's a little more satisfying. But I do think there's got to be some way to make this film a little more of a satisfying journey to get to the conclusions you want to show your audience. And that's not a major knock against the film. Like I said, overall, I really like this film. I think it's worth seeing in theaters. So don't take that as like, oh, it destroyed the watching and viewing experience of this masterpiece. Because, nah, I mean, it's just a good time. And that's all this movie is. And I also believe Mike P. Nelson also wrote this. So I like a nice writer-director combo when it comes to slasher movies. I think it makes the vision of the artist a lot more apparent versus having a different writer and a different director, because then I think with slasher movies especially, they really start falling apart when the writer and director aren't on the same page. But yeah, I'd give this movie a 3.5 out of 5. I had a lot of fun with it. I think it's worth checking out in theaters. If you have the time, go do it. It's a great watch, especially if you're a fan of the original. I think it does it justice, if not maybe making it an even better movie. I think I still personally prefer the original just because the nostalgia and how early on I found that in my horror watching, I guess, career, my horror watching obsession. But this one is a great time and not one you should skip or wait for on streaming. I think you should go to theaters if you can for this one. I think it's worth your money and I think it's a good watch. So I highly recommend it. And I also want to take a second to thank the PR group who is behind this movie for getting me a screener access. I was not able to attend the events as I was getting ready to travel, which is why this video kind of looks a little different than usual. So thank you guys so much for working with me on that. Just for clarifications, as it's a big topic in the film discussion and criticism space, none of my opinions on this film were influenced by the fact that I got a screener. I think that's a very important thing to make clear, especially in this day and age. So, but yeah, hopefully you guys are doing well, having a wonderful holiday season, and I will see you all next time. Bye.